took this amount of time because the time it takes to complete an investigation is dependent upon the scope of the investigation.
Almost 2 years after a student and teacher were killed at Central Visual Performing Arts High School, as St. Louis police say they will release 2 videos from the shooting on Wednesday. We'll see a nearly 9-minute clip from inside and then another 2-minute video from body camera video. That one shows the officer who engaged the shooter. New at 6:30, First Alert 4 investigator Susan Elcory is live in studio tonight with St. Louis Police Chief Robert Tracy, digging deeper into this now nearly 2-year-long investigation. Susan.
Well, Chief Tracy, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. One of the big questions on the top of people's minds is why now, almost 2 years after this shooting, is this video finally being released?
Well, first of all, Susan, my heart and prayers go out to the families of this shooting, the 2 that died and the others who were injured. We like to move things as quickly as possible. I was not here for this. I watched it from my last place where I was a chief in Wilmington, Delaware, and I saw the information come out, and I saw this tremendous job that was done by first responders, getting to the school, getting to quickly and mitigating and taking out a killer who actually was going to cause a lot more harm in that school. We have sunshine laws here in the state of Missouri, and coming in, I have to abide by these sunshine laws. And when you have an open investigation, this open investigation needs to be finished, done properly, and you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of interviews and video, and we got to make sure that we're doing everything right. We talked about today about 700 pages of investigation that we'll be releasing. Sunshine lawyers are looking at it right now for my department, and they'll be redacting some things, but we want to get that out as quickly as possible. So it's not so much getting out quickly, it's making sure we got it right, and then also adhering to the laws that we have to adhere to in the state of Missouri.
We've been talking to the families of Jean Kuchka and Alexandria Bell, who both say, they want this information to understand if there were missed opportunities or lessons learned. One of the questions that's come up is the school had unarmed security guards. They didn't have school resource officers, which is something we're seeing at schools across the metro area. What would you recommend? Well,
if you heard today, St. Louis Public Schools talked about their type of security they have in place. They have unarmed, and they also have a mobile reserve team that goes around for all schools, and they respond to critical incidents. And if they see things that they might have to mobilize and be there to prevent something happening, they like that balance between having unarmed and also armed responding. And it's something that they're going to stand by. They've looked at best practices, and they've looked at the risks, and this is exactly where they want to be. We're going to respond when 911 is called, and we're going to respond accordingly to make sure we can mitigate any threats that happen.
One of the things that we found is that the school district had to dial 911 because they didn't have a direct line to police. And in those 911 call recordings, you can hear an off-site dispatcher trying to talk to people who are in the school, then relay information to police. Have there been any recommendations for changes, knowing in those moments time matters, and so does clear, concise communication?
Well, I think looking at the 911 calls, I think we'll look at things to see if we can do things better. We're actually always doing reviews on that. As you can see, we have more dispatches now. We have training. We were down dispatches, and now we've pretty much got them up to budgeted strength. It goes through training, making sure that we're vetting the calls properly, we're prioritizing those calls. And I think in the response to what happened and the time that this shooter got into the school and the time it was mitigated, it was unlike any other place where, if you take a look at Parkland, Uvalde, you take a look at Sandy Hook, I think our officers responded very quickly through their training, and they went right after the threat without waiting.
When we're looking at some of those things and that response, or that things that we could be seeing in these records in terms of not just lessons learned, but some of the good things that came out of this?
Well, I don't think you can have anything good at a school shooting. I mean, it's a trauma that we're seeing throughout the United States. We're seeing more and more in recent history, but it does go back to 1966 when University of Texas, when you're looking at the tower shooting. And then we look at everything, Columbine. We look at in what we do, security experts, active shooter drills, not just in schools, how we can do this better. And we're always looking to see if there's things we can do better. What came out of this that I would say is that our response time, not waiting, we started doing active shooter training, and we've been doing it throughout the United States and even in my last police department. We're getting better and better at how to go out and address these things to make sure when the person comes in, if there is casualties, and to try to slow that down. And I think if you take a look at what the school did, they had systems in place that once he entered the school, that they were able to communicate, shut down schools, lock doors, turn lights off, that they saved a lot of lives in doing that. Security officers, although they were unarmed, they did engage with that shooter, what I saw in some of the video, and being unarmed, engaging with someone like that probably helped save a lot of lives as well. So anything good good can come out of this is some of the responses, although we did lose 2 lives and there were several people injured, you know, it's a tragedy, and some of these people acted heroically, and that's what I can commend on such a tragic, horrific incident.
Our investigation into this revealed hours of recordings, hundreds of pages of documents, and some of the questions there that go to missed opportunities with the shooter himself. In his own writings, he talked about how he had told at least 2 psychiatrists that he had planned an attack on the school. Was that information ever brought to law enforcement?
Well, I know you did an interview with our former chief. He's now as a lieutenant colonel. He was the interim chief, and he did talk about it. We did talk about red flag laws and how those things can be brought out. Each state has different laws. I think our state legislators have to take a good look at that. They'll make that determination of what can be brought, what can be told to police. But I think there has to be reasonableness in what we can and can do if people experience mental health issues, and trying to make sure they didn't have access to the gun and do something like this young man did to this school on that date, October 24th.
And we saw that body camera video of when police had been called out to the shooter's home days before, his family concerned about that. When you see that video and you see the response from officers there, one of the questions has been, could police have taken away the gun that day?
Not as the law as it is right now, and I think that was explained by the lieutenant colonel, and what the actions, the officers, they did everything they could do in the law, and what they tried to do is some reasonableness and try to transfer that gun to somebody else for safekeeping, so the individual that we were worried about, they were worried about, could not have access to the gun, and unfortunately regained access, and you saw the results of it on October 24th.
Knowing that this video is coming out in just 2 days, we heard you talking a little bit about just your concern for the community and the trauma around this. What are some of the steps that you all have taken?
Well, we talked about it today. The things that we did, first of all, to the families that have going through this, the victims' families, and then also the injury to some of the kids that are in the school, teachers, the community. We want to make sure that we have services. For the ones that did see the video that we allowed for the last couple of days before the video comes out, we were very sensitive to how that's going to re-traumatize people. There's going to be triggers, kids going back into school. We want to make sure we can get them any mental health therapy that anyone needs. We were doing anything, making sure that our officers that were at this school shooting, we made sure that we offered those services to them. And we're going to continue to offer those services because some didn't see it, but it is going to be out in the news. And as we know, on Wednesday when we release it, it's going to be played. And that might trigger some anxiety in individuals. And we want to make sure that we try to keep everybody in a good place.
Well, we appreciate your time tonight, Chief. And there is a lot more to this story. You can learn and also watch our investigation by visiting firstalert4.com/CVPA revealed. We'll be right back.